So today we will talk about the swamp deer in Hindi, Barasingha and the Kaziranga National Park. Why we are talking about the swamp deer? Basically there is a decline in the eastern swamp deer basically in the Kaziranga National Park. That's why we are talking about the swamp deer. So let's talk about the swamp deer and the Kaziranga National Park. So recently there is a decline in the eastern swamp deer Barasingha. In Hindi if you talk about, then Barasingha is known as in the Kaziranga National Park. Somewhere around from the 800 something to around the 600 something there is a decline. Around 100 plus swamp deer, eastern swamp deer. Remember that there are basically the three species of swamp deer. So if you talk about what are the regions in the swamp deer, obviously there are the two floods in the 2019 and 2020, and as you know in the Brahmaputra valley, which actually this Kaziranga National Park situated, leads to heavy flood, and that's why there is a decline in the eastern swamp deer around somewhere 100 plus. So that's why. If you talk about the swamp deer, then remember that it is basically the western swamp deer is one species. Second is the southern swamp deer is the second species. If you talk about the third is the eastern swamp deer. So there is total three species of swamp deer. So if you talk about the western swamp deer, then remember that this is the western swamp deer is one species, and this is the scientific name of the western swamp deer. If you talk about it is found in Nepal, remember that it is found in Nepal, and it has been already extinct in the Bangladesh and Pakistan, and there are the a certain number in Bhutan. So remember that. If you talk about IUCN status, then remember that all the species of swamp deer means the Barasingha is the vulnerable. So remember that, not endangered or not critically endangered. There is a vulnerable species. All the three species of swamp deer is vulnerable. Remember that if you talk about the site, then protected under the appendix 1 of site. So remember that. If you talk about the southern swamp deer, then remember that this is the scientific name. So this is basically the same. If you talk about, this is also the same. Here is the Brandry is the different in the scientific name of southern swamp deer. Remember that. If you talk about the found in the central and northern India, and Madhya Pradesh is the most famous place for the swamp deer. Remember that in India. If you talk about, if you talk about IUCN status, then remember that it is a vulnerable species and protected under the appendix 1. So remember that. If you talk about the eastern swamp deer, then remember that this is the scientific name of the eastern swamp deer, found in the Kaziranga National Park, which is situated in Assam. And further if you talk about it, another is the Dudhwa National Park, which is situated in the Uttar Pradesh, is favorable for the eastern swamp deer. If you talk about, it is also a vulnerable species, protected under the appendix 1, and as I have already told you that all the protected under the schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Act 1972, which is an Indian law for the protection of vulnerable and endangered and critically endangered species. Further if you talk about the swamp deer, then remember that basically swamp deer found, or you can say the occur, in the Kanha National Park in Madhya Pradesh, which is very important, you know, sometime ask the national park. So remember that the Kanha National Park in the Madhya Pradesh actually found the most of the swamp deer. Remember that. If you talk about another is the Panch National Park, is also at the border of the Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. So remember that. If you talk about two in Assam, basically the Kaziranga and the Manas National Park, and around the 6 localities in UP. So remember that 6 localities in UP also found this swamp deer. So remember that. If you talk about the Kaziranga National Park, then remember that it is located in Assam. As you know very well that it is located in Assam and covers around the 42,996 hectares. So remember that it is the single largest undisturbed and representative area in the Brahmaputra Valley flood plain. So that's why there is a flood in the 2019 and 2020, which lead to the reduction in the eastern swamp deer. So this is basically a undisturbed and representative area in the Assam or at the Brahmaputra Valley floodplain if you talk about. So remember that if you talk about the another and most important feature, then remember that it was declared as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1985. Is one of the important feature about the Kaziranga National Park. If you talk about what is the main importance, why Kaziranga actually known for, is known for the one-horned rhinoceros. Around it consists of two-third of wild one-horned rhinoceros, somewhere around 2000 plus. So remember that 2000 plus actually one-horned rhinoceros found in the Kaziranga. So this is basically one of the main features of the Kaziranga National Park. If you talk about another, if you talk about, there are also the consist of big four species, which as I have already told you, that one-horned rhinoceros, another is the elephant. If you talk about Royal Bengal tiger, and another is the Asiatic buffalo. So these are basically the main feature on the basis of which you can identify that yes, we are talking about the Kaziranga National Park. Further, if you talk about the Kaziranga National Park, then remember that there actually the National Highway 37 actually passes through the park, is one of the important fact you can remember that. And if you talk about, more than 250 seasonal water bodies actually found here, and Diplu River passes through the Kaziranga National Park, remember that. If you talk about other national park which is found in the Assam, then remember that first is the Dibru-Sakhawat National Park, first is the Kaziranga, another is the Dibru-Sakhawat, another is the Masam National Park. If you talk about the Pabitra National Park, Nameri National Park, and the Rajiv Gandhi Orang National Park are actually, these are the national park others which is found along with the Kaziranga National Park in Assam. This is all about of this video. If you talk about what is the summary of this video, then remember that the Kanha National Park for swamp deer in Madhya Pradesh is very important. And remember that there is a decline in the eastern swamp deer. There are the three species of swamp deer, and in Hindi it is popularly known as the Barasinga. If you talk about, there are also two locations in the Assam where actually the swamp deer found. The first is the Kaziranga, and another is the Manas National Park, and 6 localities in UP actually where the swamp deer found. Then remember that if you talk about the Kaziranga National Park, one of the most important features of the Kaziranga National Park, it is home to 2/3 of world one-horned rhinoceros, and especially the 4 big cat species are also found in the Kaziranga National Park. If you talk about another important feature is that it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site which is declared by the UNESCO in 1985. So thank you guys, hope you like this video.